Hi everyone, and a very warm welcome to DevMarcon, the first developer marketing summit from the PMA. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We hope you enjoy the sessions that we have lined up for you. With expert presentations, specialist fireside chats, and deep dive panel discussions on the agenda, suffice to say, you're in for a treat. Just before we jump in, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who's played a part in making this event possible. Our sponsors, partners, speakers, and of course you, the Product Marketing Alliance community. You can engage with all our speakers and their sessions today by posting your questions in the comments section of the broadcast, or you can reach out to them in the Developer Marketing channel in our Slack community. Remember, you can also catch up with all the day's content on demand, plus a whole host of other amazing benefits by becoming a PMA member. But for now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next session.
Welcome to our session where today we're going to walk you through how at Mulesoft we drive product adoption through developer champions.
Cool. My name is Jason Joel, and I'm a product marketing manager here at Mulesoft. I've been with the company almost about 2 years now, and my focus is on our developer tooling. So I was really excited to be able to present at PMA's Developer Marketing Summit because it's a topic I'm super interested in.
And my name is Sabrina Marichal. I'm a senior manager of community at Mulesoft. Been with the company for more than 4 years now, and we've been able to do a lot of great things with Jason. We are going to answer any questions you might have during the session, so please use the live chat to ask anything you want to know about our programs.
Cool. And yeah, before we kind of get into the meat of today's presentation, I wanted to give a brief overview of just what Mulesoft does. So Mulesoft, if you may or may not have heard, is actually a part of Salesforce, but we have our own kind of standalone business unit and operating function. And Mulesoft provides the world's #1 integration and API platform. Our flagship product is Anypoint Platform, and our customers who use Anypoint Platform are able to develop integrations and APIs faster. We have a bunch of customer stories that you can check out kind of on our website. Let's not get too deep into the product messaging or product pitch today, but we wanted to give you a brief overview of just what Mulesoft does. So let's move into kind of the agenda for today's session.
And so here's what we're going to do today. So we're going to walk you through our respective objectives and where Jason and I meet and align our goals, and how we approach our community and how it's structured for us to be able to enable the enablers who are going to help us spread the word.
Yep. And then we'll also go through kind of how we do inbound collaboration. So how Sabrina and I collaborate to help kind of effectively work on the product as it's being developed, and more inbound messaging. And then we'll also talk about the outbound side of the house, where we use community champions to help kind of advocate and scale our product message and our product marketing. And ultimately, we'll see how this kind of the results of this is a win-win-win scenario for not only our developer champions, but also product marketing and community marketing.
And I'm not going to say this because it's my community, but at Mulesoft, we are very lucky to have an outstanding community. It's extremely vibrant and drives a lot of evangelism. It has countless community events every month, more than 40 actually, and we actually more than doubled this number over the past year. It creates a lot of content by itself and generates a lot of peer-to-peer support on a daily basis. So just to give you a few ideas and numbers here, we have a physical presence of the community in more than 140 cities across 35 countries. And we count more than 500 champions who evangelize on our behalf on a regular basis. So today, what we want to do with this session is to show you how we generate this evangelism and how we surf the wave to even further promote our product launches.
Yeah. And one of the things I wanted to kind of like, start with the numbers, share immediately, was one of the success stories that we've had over the last year. So you can see by this little chart here, we were shooting for something around like 100% growth of number of apps deployed for a particular product recently. And through kind of community-led evangelism and developer champions, we were able to way surpass our initial expectations and kind of grow our product adoption at over 170%, which is incredible. And obviously, it's not completely due to just our developer champions. There's a lot of behind the scenes things that happen with the entire marketing team, with the entire organization. But one of the things that Sabrina and I had worked very closely on was we knew this product launch was going to be developer focused. And so for our product launch event in April-May timeframe, we had a lot of focus on building enablement kits and developer meetups and making community or encouraging the creation of community created content. So we really think that our developer champions played a huge part in the success of this product launch. And for all of our product launches that we worked with in the future for developer related products, we've really been focused at partnering very closely to make sure that that we're aligned and that we can use our developer community to its greatest impact. So first, let's kind of talk about our respective objectives, how Sabrina and I work together. When we think about from the product marketing side of the house, a lot of the times my main KPIs that I'm considering are either the number of monthly active users on our platform or the number of apps deployed on a certain deployment environment. And so my day-to-day is either doing the go-to-market strategy for new products and new developments that we're creating, executing on the launches of those new products, and then also enabling either our field or our customers on those new products.
And so on my side, the main KPIs I'm looking at are the number of champions, meaning the developers who evangelize for us, that we can nurture over time to make really strong advocates for Mulesoft, as well as the number of meetups taking place, because these really showcase the vibrancy of our community. And so my main focus is to source champions who are knowledgeable on the platform and are willing to build their brand. Because if they want to build their brand, they will want to be out there. They will want to evangelize for us and be visible by Mulesoft sites. And so the happy place where Jason and I meet, do you want to go over yours first?
Yeah. So I think for me, it's really about our developer champions evangelizing either new product launches or kind of the scaling out of our message and our enablement. I think that's one of the greatest ways that they can help from a product marketing perspective, because I'm only one person and Sabrina's only a second person, and having this whole community to really, understand why we're building a specific product and then help us scale out that message is really impactful for my side of the house.
And so while Jason sees champions as evangelists, I see product launches as opportunities to make more evangelists. So launches are the opportunity for our champions to meet, to learn more about the product, engage with us, and really go out there and spread the word for us, which ultimately leads to a deeper relationship with them. And so the way our community is structured, we have multiple tiers, but when it comes to product launches, we focus on the 3 top tiers, who are the most engaged and knowledgeable members. So we start with the meetup leaders, so the volunteers who organize Mulesoft events on a regular basis, either in their region or online. We have about 350 of them. And then we look at the mentors who are knowledgeable members who are engaged on several channels. So they can do meetups, they can write content, they can help others on the forum. They are present in multiple places. And lastly, we have the tippy top of the pyramid, which is the Mirrorsoft Ambassadors. They are the MVPs of the community, the top members, the most recognized ones. And their voice is really strong in our community. And so there are two ways that they help us support our go-to-market strategy, inbound and outbound.
Yeah, and so for the first part, I'll handle the inbound piece. This is really centered around during the product development process, getting crucial feedback from our community members. So we do this through a number of different ways. We'll run surveys, we'll run feedback or focus groups with members of the community. And I was able to develop, a lot of personal relationships with these developers out in our community who are really just, eager to learn and to take part in our product development process, more in kind of a design partnership aspect.
Mm-hmm. And then the outbound front, our champions really help us support our launches by organizing meetups where they're going to educate their attendees on our new products or improvements. They're going to create tutorials and write blogs either on our website or on theirs. And they're also going to create videos, support our promotions on socials, and they're also going to speak at third-party events. So they are really our microphones to the world, spreading the word on what we do.
Yeah. So we're going to kind of dive in a little bit deeper into each of these inbound, outbound, and kind of more the logistics side of the house of like how Sabrina and I execute on them. So first I'll do the inbound piece. So for the inbound collaboration, I work with a ton of PMs here. They're a great group of product leaders. And oftentimes, they ask me like, hey, I want to test this question, this hypothesis, right? And so together we'll work on building some hypothesis or some question, and we can actually use the community as input to answer that question. So depending on the question, we'll either do a survey to community members, we'll set up a feedback focus group anywhere from maybe 5 to 12 people, or sometimes if it's something that I want to do kind of quick and dirty, I'll use some of the personal relationships that I've built. So for example, at the top there, if I wanted to present, like quantitative metrics, numbers, I'm giving some PowerPoint presentation, I want to show this percent of the community or this percent of our developers use a certain piece of our platform or think XYZ, I'd probably run a survey so I can get a large sample size and kind of do more quantitative analysis. If instead I wanted to ask a more qualitative question, tell me about your experience with the platform, tell me about some of your the pain points you run into, I'd probably set up a focus group or a Zoom meeting to kind of get a bunch of people's opinion on either our existing product experience or showcase a new product in a demo and get their thoughts. Or for the personal relationships, like I said, if it's quick and dirty and I just want to get someone's thoughts on something very quickly, we have a Slack channel or Slack community created for our community members. Yeah, I don't know if the technical term for like a Slack.
It's a dedicated workspace where we can interact with our community members.
Yes, yeah, thank you. So yeah, I can just kind of ping any of the developers that I've met and I know very well, and kind of get their quick thoughts on something. So this inbound collaboration piece has been key for me to kind of help our PMs, understand the landscape of our developer persona more effectively, and help build go-to-market strategy documents, and work on the strategy of our product development process.
And then on the outbound collaboration side, so it all starts with quarterly planning, where we plan our product launches together, so PMM and community. That's where we align where on what we're going to launch and how much support we want from the community. And usually the actual enablement of our champion starts about 1 to 2 weeks before the launch, where we schedule enablement sessions on our online event platform. So the goal here is to have Q&A sessions, mini classes on what we're launching, and answer any questions that our champions might have. And we also give them what we call a content kit, and that includes a slide deck with a talk track, a cheat sheet, some screenshots, everything they need to be ready to go out there and evangelize, and also answer questions themselves, because they have the status of community leaders, so they need to be able to answer questions they get on the product. And as the launch date comes, that's when all the comms start about the new product or improvements, both from Mulesoft and from the community. So we see our champions starting to host events, publish content, advocate on socials for everything we just announced. And it's not just going to take place at the launch date. All of these activities are going to last at least a few months post-launch, as we see more events rolling out in regions, more content going more and more in depth on the products. Also champions answering questions popping up on socials. So it's really a long-term game when we do this.
Yeah, excuse me. So the results is, really everyone wins here. It's good for the product marketing team, it's good for the community team, and it's also good for the community members. From the product marketing side of the house, I think one of the things to stress here is we do have both that inbound and outbound benefit, first from the go-to-market input and feedback as we're working on strategy, and then also the product evangelism and the adoption growth that we see from the execution of all the various activities and content that community members play a part of.
Yeah, and from my team's point of view, that leads to more vibrancy and peer-to-peer support as we have these advocates creating content and supporting others around these launches. And ultimately, that makes a healthy and growing community. So that really helps us grow. And sorry, on the community members front, being able to participate in these launches and getting access to exclusive knowledge from us, they get to build a stronger reputation in our ecosystem. That leads to personal growth. They get more knowledgeable on the product, they get more recognition from their peers as being Mulesoft experts, and that also gives them more opportunities in our ecosystem in terms of job opportunities and so on.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've already shown kind of some of the metrics that we covered before, but yeah, we have a lot of great success partnering both PMM and community and marketing. And so, yeah, we're really excited to have shared this journey that we've been on kind of using and taking advantage of the collaboration between our teams and how we're driving, product adoption with developer champions. So I think the last thing we want to do is first, thank you, but also kind of like a selfish CTA that I think is very common at these type of events, which is check out our job opportunities, join our team. This is a gift from one of our recent happy hours, but yeah, I think our marketing team at Mulesoft is hiring for a bunch of roles. I put a link here for specifically filtered on our marketing team. We have a lot of product marketing opportunities. We have some other opportunities as well. I know Sabrina's hiring. Maybe you want to share.
Yes, I'm hiring for a new community marketing person for a new product we just launched. So a brand new role, lots of opportunities to have an impact at Mulesoft. So join us.
Yeah, and feel free to connect with both Sabrina and I on LinkedIn. We'd be happy to just connect and chat. So thanks so much.
Yeah, and please keep asking questions in the chat. We are here to respond.
Cool. Thank you.
Bye.
Hi everyone, I hope you're all enjoying DevMarcon, the first developer marketing summit from the Product Marketing Alliance. Before we dive into the next session, I just wanted to let you know about an exciting opportunity we are opening up to you all today. We are on the lookout for our first developer marketing ambassadors to come and join us as founding members of this new community. As well as helping us shape our content, events, and training courses, our ambassadors also receive a whole host of fantastic benefits, including a complimentary PMA membership. Keep an eye on the comment section as we'll be posting more info and the link to apply now. If you have any questions, you can come and find me in the PMA Slack community and I'll be happy to share more information.
Being an amazing product marketing leader doesn't happen by chance. It happens by habit. Product marketing certified leadership has been built on the back of decades worth of experience from some of the world's best known brands with one goal in mind: helping you be the best leader you can be. Crammed with real life case studies, over 12 hours worth of content, templates, exams, and more, this course is everything you need to lead with authority, confidence, influence, and innovation. Every piece of material within the 7 modules and 29 chapters has been vetted, tested, and approved by senior level product marketers from companies like Amazon, Uber, and HubSpot, serving up game-changing insights throughout. By the time you've wrapped up the final module, you'll be able to define what it takes to be a great product marketing leader, build and scale your team, understand how to successfully manage your existing team, use methods for leveraging data, know how to become the voice of the customer, understand how teams work cross-functionally, and improve your strategic thinking. The beauty of the course is you'll have the freedom to work your way through the modules at a pace to suit you. It's 100% self-paced. You'll even get lifetime access to the curriculum, paving the way for refresher sessions forevermore. Visit productmarketingalliance.com to get leadership certified and spearhead your journey to the top.
Welcome back to DevMarkon, the first developer marketing summit from the Product Marketing Alliance. I hope you're enjoying the content so far. I want to thank you all for joining us and send out an extra special thank you to all our sponsors, partners, and participants who together have made this event possible. Their sessions are bursting with insights to help you level up. But remember, the learning doesn't stop here. If you haven't already, you can become a PMA member and benefit from unlimited access to all today's content, along with a whole host of other exclusive content and tools. Or simply upgrade to an Access All Areas pass to catch up with all session recordings on demand. And remember, have your questions at the ready. Simply post them in the comments section and get awesome advice from our experts. We've got another awesome session lined up for you now, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the talk.
Hey y'all, I'm Shazia and I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager for the developer platform at Square. Today, I'm excited to talk to y'all about building a Voice of Developer program, a way to help keep developer empathy top of mind within an organization. As marketers in the developer space, we're fortunate to have an audience that's vocal and tells us exactly what they need to improve upon their day-to-day. This could come in many forms and sources, such as feature requests through user interviews or bugs through support. It's up to us to take this feedback and make it more actionable, quantifiable, and discoverable across an organization without losing sight of the end goal of the Voice of Developer program, which is to establish a two-way feedback loop between you and the developers using your products. I could likely spend hours on this topic, but if you have any questions or any areas that you want to discuss, please feel free to tweet me or send me a message through Twitter. My handle is on the screen currently, and it's at Miss Shazia. For this talk, let's hone in on the challenges a Voice of Developer program helps to solve, the steps needed to get the program underway, improving the quality and the effectiveness of the program, and of course, measuring the success of your Voice of Developer efforts. Over the years and countless hours of research later, I find that most companies fall into two buckets when it comes to collecting feedback from their users. The first bucket is where companies or stakeholders may find feedback to be a distraction. This could be in a sense that, hey, if we open up the floodgates, we won't be able to manage or deliver upon expectations because we don't have the resources. Then there's the second bucket. Then there's the second bucket, companies that have made available a ton of channels for collecting feedback. They'll acknowledge the feedback or explain why certain features fail to exist, but that's where it stops. The feedback doesn't get reported to the right PMs or engineers or even higher ups. And in the end, users don't feel heard and will likely keep complaining to no avail. Now, what a Voice of Developer program aims to do is strike a balance between collecting feedback, communicating what's possible and what may not be, and using the feedback to influence not only product roadmaps, but in our case as marketers, it also informs our messaging and go-to-market efforts. My first venture into the world of Voice of Developer, or Voice of Customer, as we called it then, was at GitHub. My amazing manager at the time felt we needed a way to increase developer satisfaction, but moreover, further cultivate a customer-obsessed culture when building products. I even had a code name for this initiative. I'm not sure why, but I was definitely excited. I very much focused the initiative to get buy-in. I very much focused on the initiative to get buy-in org-wide, audit our feedback channels, devise a framework to prioritize the feedback, and eventually the goal was to publicize our product roadmaps for broader exposure. Now, I realize there are a lot of factors that go into building a successful Voice of Developer program. Let's take a look at some of the problem areas a VOD program helps to solve. It improves discoverability and creates a streamlined process and system for sharing feedback within the company and internal stakeholders such as PMs, engineering, design, marketing, and broader leadership. You'll realize that there are so many different channels where the feedback lives. The Voice of Developer program helps firstly to identify the many channels feedback is captured in. Feedback has a tendency of getting lost or not included in prioritization exercises simply because it may live on Twitter, but PMs are looking at support tickets and user interviews. Plus, identifying your top channels and creating a one-stop shop repository for your feedback makes the feedback attributable. And you're able to respond to your users or even let them know that you've shipped something that they've requested. Feedback is great, but it doesn't do much if it sits in a doc or support ticket, somewhere in the cloud. A Voice of Developer program helps influence your Feedback is great, but it doesn't do much if it sits in a doc or support ticket somewhere. A Voice of Developer program Feedback is great, but it doesn't do much if it sits in a doc or support ticket somewhere. A Voice of Developer program helps influence your product roadmaps based on this feedback. This could be major bug fixes, new webhooks or SDKs, or other feature updates that not only enhance your product, but also your overall developer satisfaction. Plus, feedback is great, but it doesn't do much if it sits in a doc or support ticket somewhere. A Voice of Developer program helps influence your product roadmaps based on this feedback. This could be major bug fixes, new webhooks or SDKs, or other feature updates that not only enhance your products, but also your overall developer satisfaction. Plus, this feedback provides insight into market trends and competitive tidbits. Some users might be using your product in tandem with other products or comparing it to other products. It always helps, especially for marketers, to gain an understanding of what else is piquing your users' interests. In my experience, reporting upward on product gaps and challenges has helped identify broader need for more resources. This could mean more budget, more headcount, you name it. It also helps leadership stay in tune with user feedback, which helps impact longer-term, higher-level growth for the company. And mainly, the program helps keep empathy towards your developer community top of mind for the organization. Outside of just product teams, but also support, sales, ops, every team involved at your organization. Even if teams are building first-party products that may not impact developers directly, they'll have a better idea of the types of gaps and challenges products have when it comes to things, say, like extensibility. And mainly, the program helps keep empathy towards your developer community top of mind for the organization. Outside of just product teams, but also support, sales, ops, marketing, everyone. Even if teams are building first-party products that may not impact developers directly, they'll have a better idea of the types of gaps and challenges products have when it comes to things like extensibility. People often ask me why I'm so passionate about developers and developer marketing. It's easy. Developers are building software that's changing the world. The first black hole image was taken using extensive code from an open source community of millions of developers. In order for us to understand, support, and expand this type of innovation, we need to gain a better understanding of the developer audience and give them the tools that they need to keep building. This simply can't be done through traditional marketing, but building authentic connections, value-add messaging, and a community around the products we help to build and promote. That's why developer empathy is consistently top of mind for me, hence building out a Voice of Developer program. This also means that a Voice of Developer program is meant to be an evergreen initiative, to be expanded upon and repeatable, and not a one and done type situation. In order for your developers to trust you, it's important to be consistent in your approach, especially as it comes to your feedback loop. There are quite a few steps associated with building a successful Voice of Developer program. I'm big on docs, so each of the steps I mentioned are normally fleshed out as part of a written brief, in which I start with the problem statement, something we've covered previously. So let's dive right in. Step 1, identify your goals. Different orgs may have different objectives that they're trying to tackle. Is your objective to showcase your feedback to relevant stakeholders? It might be to create a one-stop shop to house all your feedback so it's easier to search and engage with. Perhaps your org isn't acting on feedback today, unless it stems from very angry support tickets. Or perhaps you realize feedback isn't top of mind when building new features or products, and you'd like to change that. And hey, even as marketers, creating a program might be for us to better tackle our messaging, understand use cases, and be able to synthesize that broadly in our communication plans. Whatever your goals might be, it's important to understand them up front, as they'll impact how you get buy-in for the program and the resources that you may need to keep it running. Step 2, find your champions. It's easy for us to put in a ton of work to create processes and frameworks that folks don't end up using. Voice of Developer program can be as heavy or as light of a lift as you'd like, but in no way is the intention to create process-oriented delays in product development. That should be communicated upfront. As you start building out the program, it'll be rather pertinent for you to find your relevant stakeholders. I'll tell you, PMs, engineers, and designers will be the first to sign up. Knowing what users want makes their jobs easier as they devise, design, and plan. Support already gets bombarded with feedback. They'll appreciate being able to respond meaningfully, or better yet, have a PM talk to customers directly. Sales and marketing teams will appreciate being able to better anticipate certain questions or requests. And leadership will be able to see what users are asking for and help in finding resources to support certain requests that could very well up the ante on the product or feature set. People will be on board, but it's about making it easy for them to understand why and how it'll benefit them and the business in the long run. Plus, accountability is an important part of the Voice of Developer program. The right people need to be involved in order to act on the feedback received. That's why setting your problem statement and identifying your goals act as your first step. Step 3, audit your feedback channels. These could be internally sourced channels such as support tickets, your own developer community and forums, user interviews conducted by PMs or other stakeholders, feedback your sales, partnerships, and channel teams get when they're making deals, or questions SEs receive when working with customers on solutions. And then you have external channels such as GitHub, Twitter, Slack communities, Discord, Stack Overflow, Reddit, and so many others. Plus, there's a whole other stream of feedback that comes in from surveys, such as NPS, that provide more insight. Step 4, prioritize your feedback channels. This may vary between small and large companies, but essentially you may not have the resources, people, or bandwidth to tackle every channel. So you've got to A, identify the channels that are most used and regularly maintained, and B, be mindful of the noise. Customers will complain anywhere they can, so you've got to pick up on the most effective channels for you. I've found these to be largely rooted in support tickets and internally sourced developer channels such as forums, business development teams, and of course, direct user interviews. Plus, as you're picking your channels, make sure They're ones that relevant stakeholders can access and use to respond to or collect additional information. Next up is to find a home for your voice of developer assets. As you've now learned going through potentially many channels of feedback, it can be tough to discover and attribute the feedback that you find, especially when it spans across multiple avenues. Building a one-stop shop repository for the feedback that you collect will be important. It makes discoverability and attribution easier, but also it'll be simpler to track status on things like responses, people involved, and progress made on improving or backlogging based on what you've received. Previously, I've used a GitHub repository that housed each piece of feedback as its own issue with specified labels for feedback type, labels such as feature requests, bug fixes, or anecdotes. Then, each issue was assigned to relevant stakeholders. The labels help track feedback based on type. Assigning issues to the right stakeholders helped build accountability, and the repository itself let you search through issues to track things like frequency of ask and channels feedback were taken from. Plus, using projects helps track progress made on each type of request. There are other tools as well, such as even creating a Google Drive to capture interview notes and a Jira or Looker dashboard to track support tickets and resolutions. Define SLAs for response times and create canned responses. This step is often forgotten simply because we may take in a request and forget to respond or not have anything useful to say right off the bat. So we wait in hopes for that to change. Don't do this. For accountability's sake, say you give yourself or your teams 5 business days to respond to a request. You can create canned replies based on product scope. For example, you can let the user know that your team is working on the feature request or bug fix currently, plans to work on it in the next 3 months or 6 months, or that it's not prioritized on your roadmap today, but you will share the feedback with the relevant teams. The answer doesn't always have to be yes, but an answer itself helps the developer feel heard and acknowledged. Step 7, synthesize the feedback. When you report on your feedback, which is the next step, it'll be important that this information isn't provided as a list or link-offs, but as actionable insights to folks who may only have 30 to 60 seconds to understand. Step 7, synthesize the feedback. When you report on your feedback, which is the next step, it'll be important that this information isn't provided as a list or link-offs, but as actionable insights to folks who may only have 30 to 60 seconds to understand what's needed to fix potential issues. Depending on the format used to report out, I focus on slicing feedback based on specific products, APIs, or feature sets, identify key trends observed, and report out on the analysis I've been able to conduct. Usually this is in written form or something more visual, such as tables and charts, and reported out monthly or quarterly to relevant stakeholders. A quick example of a short insight might be, our feedback app has seen a lot of positive reviews from our users this month, with the main theme being to improve productivity by adding emoji reactions and searchable filters. Next, report regularly on your findings. Going back to something I've mentioned already, the feedback is important, but it means zero if not shared with the right people. Reporting to relevant stakeholders and keeping voice of developer top of mind within your org will help to alleviate some of the problems associated with feedback capture in general, but also truly help internal stakeholders empathize with the folks using your products. I like to use all hands and both monthly and quarterly business reviews as a good way to surface this feedback. Other options could be to create a specific Slack channel that updates out when new feedback is added to your Voice of Developer hub, or even roundtables and enablement sessions with your product, sales, partnerships, and/or channel teams. As with any passionate community, we tend to receive a lot of feedback from our developers, and unfortunately, not all feedback can be prioritized or acted upon. In order to take into consideration various factors of prioritization, I've previously created a framework that I use to guide my own prioritization exercises. Again, this could vary with company or team size, but it does help provide a general baseline. I call it the FAIR method, and it takes into account frequency, which is the number of times we've received this feedback, alignment, which is how closely does this align with our current company and or I call it the FAIR method, and it takes into account frequency, which is the number of times we've received this feedback, alignment, which is how closely does this align with our current company and or team goals. And this is usually measured through percent. So 100% for high alignment, 50% for medium alignment, so on and so forth. Impact, which is how high or low does the fulfillment of this feedback affect revenue or other targets that we're focused on. This could be the number 3 for massive impact or 0.5 for low impact. And R being reach, so the number of users this feature affects. Depending on the size of your company and user base, these numbers can vary, but my scale has usually been the number 1 for 1 to 3,000 users, 2 for 3,000 to 10,000 users, and 3 for more than 10,000 users. I then multiply each of these numbers and come up with a score. Essentially, the higher the score, the more potential the feature has to be prioritized. Clearly, this isn't a foolproof method, but in a world where growth is product-led and competition is plenty, it certainly helps build a general idea. And the last step, inform. During quarterly or annual planning, sit in with your relevant stakeholders, share the insights you've created over a given time frame, and ensure the ones that are high in priority are added as part of roadmap planning. When those features are shipped, let developers know. They'll not only be excited, but you've just rounded out a two-way feedback loop and helped improve day-to-day workflows of the very people building tools that improve our day-to-day workflows. By the way, we do measure voice of developer programs, and we'll get to that in just a bit. Regularly meeting with developers helps me realize a couple of things. Their feedback can range from, this is a complicated pricing model, please fix it, to your product is effing dope, build more. I sometimes feel like there's no middle ground, but I think that's the beauty of it. The other thing I realize is that their developer tool stack is ever changing, from tools that improve productivity to tools in the DevOps lifecycle. Over the years, I've devised my own tool stack for voice of developer programs, and I realize that with every role, with every team, the tool stack consistently evolves. In the next section, we'll discuss how to improve the quality and effectiveness of the voice of developer program, starting with my current tool stack. I mentioned previously that I've loved creating a GitHub repo. I've mentioned previously that I've loved creating a GitHub repository that acts as a hub for all feedback. I can create issues for each piece of feedback, assign specified labels to it, accompanied with labels that include product and feature names. I'm also able to assign issues to relevant stakeholders, and we're able to have discussions within the issues themselves. That makes for easy tracking and, of course, streamlines the voice of developer workflow. Once feedback is resolved, issues can be closed, but still later found if and as needed. Lately, Google Docs, Google Sheets, and Google Drive have been immensely helpful in non-GitHub using situations. Drive lets me track docs associated with user interviews and business reviews. Google Docs is where feedback is recorded under specified file names, and Google Sheets for metrics tracking. Jira dashboards, created from support tickets housed in Jira, are also helpful in tracking feedback and result cases. The downside here is that you can only track feedback if it's housed in Jira. So if your team doesn't regularly use the tool, the feedback hub might be harder to surface team-wide. Dovetail is also a fantastic research tool that helps track user interviews and various research projects in one place. For example, I'm able to add in raw interview notes with video and or audio recordings. And this is great because you can upload video audio files, and Dovetail actually creates mostly accurate transcripts. Then I'm able to use tags similar to my labeling strategy with GitHub, making it easier to search and filter through tags and build key insights based on research. The insights can be shared publicly, either externally or within your team, and depending on the type of license you have, the insights can also be easily copied and pasted into Google Docs or other tools that you might use to house your BOD assets. Delighted is a wonderful tool to gather feedback from your users in real time, whether in product or email, while also applying a Net Promoter Score using the Net Promoter System. Now, let's talk about making a splash with your Voice of Developer program. As marketers, we often rely on market study or PMs to tell us why our products are better than others. I've learned that being out there talking to customers on a regular basis is the best way to learn why or how a product is meant to be better than ours. My own habit is setting up at least 30-minute interviews per week with developers or partners using the products that I manage, asking them questions. As marketers, we often rely on market study or PMs to tell us why our products are better than others. I've learned that being out there talking to developers on a regular basis is the best way to learn why or how a product is meant to be better than competitors. My own habit is setting up at least 2 30-minute interviews per week with developers or partners using the products that I support, asking them questions around usage, what works, what doesn't, and of course, gathering feature requests. And that has helped me position and message products better than, honestly, anything else. Plus, if you're a marketer that's either driving the Voice of Developer program at your company or acting as a stakeholder, you'll also have access to excellent information that helps you understand use cases, define messaging, find testimonials, and target speakers for internal or external events. And for those of us building a developer community, we also get first access to our super fans that can help promote products to their developer friends, adding to organic growth. The Voice of Developer program isn't just for product managers to use for informing roadmaps, but marketers, whether PMMs, developer marketers, growth folks, and others, can use anecdotal information to build enablement material, better train our sales and growth teams, create campaigns targeting the right audience types, and build a community for our products simply based on feedback received. Now, let's go into inner sourcing your Voice of Developer model. Tim O'Reilly coined the term many years ago. Inner sourcing is the use of open source software, best practices, and the establishment of an open source-like culture within organizations for the development of software. It's a term we use a lot at GitHub. The reason I bring this up now is to empower anyone on your team to react to or proactively address Voice of Developers in our products and experiences. For example, if I notice feedback around a typo on a landing page, I should feel empowered to go in, fix the typo, and close out the issue or ticket. If an engineer has a quick fix to a small feature request, they should be able to go in, build what's necessary, and ship it. Voice of Developer will only work if you're all hands on deck. Improving a developer's productivity or being empathetic to developer needs isn't on one person or function. It's a group effort, and that is something people on teams should be empowered to tackle. Heck, that should even be a standing OKR, the need to read and act on developer feedback when possible. And now we'll move into the last section of this talk, which is measuring Voice of Developer efforts. And now we'll move into the last section of this talk, which is measuring Voice of Developer efforts. And now we'll move into the last section of this talk, which is measuring the success of your Voice of Developer efforts. And now we'll move into the last section of this talk, which is measuring the success of your Voice of Developer efforts. There are several ways to measure the impact of your voice of developer efforts. Some are more qualitative, such as feedback received through support tickets, email, or Twitter. Some are quantitative, such as adoption metrics, which can vary from org to org, but some examples include number of developers, number of apps created, number of apps published, number of apps installed, and number of API calls per app. There's also NPS, or Net Promoter Scores, that are calculated when users are asked to rate whether they'd recommend your company, service, or product to others, something that is surfaced in product or in an email. Plus, there are also internally sourced metrics such as support tickets resolved, time to resolution, and even tracking how many improvements were made from user requests. I also like to track often. Looking at numbers month over month, quarter over quarter, and year over year help tell a story and will help show the impact of your Voice of Developer program. And there you have it, an overview of building your very own Voice of Developer initiative. The term feedback was mentioned around 66 and maybe 67 times now. It's certainly important and a first step, but the key elements of building a two-way feedback loop include synthesizing the feedback across And there you have it, an overview of building your very own Voice of Developer program. The term feedback was mentioned 65, now 66 times in the session. It's certainly important and a first step, but the key elements of building a two-way feedback loop include synthesizing the feedback across different channels, sharing them with the right people, and influencing product roadmaps. I'd love to hear what y'all thought about this prezo and answer any questions you might have. And I'm also interested to learn more about what y'all do to keep developer empathy top of mind in your orgs. Say hi at Ms. Shazia on Twitter, or feel free to send a message over LinkedIn. Again, I'm Shazia Bandukia. Thank you so much for watching, and wherever you are, have a brilliant week. Thank you.
Hello, wherever you are joining us from today, I want to say a huge welcome to our global community. We hope you're enjoying the Developer Marketing Summit. I also want to send out an extra special thank you to all our sponsors, partners, and speakers who together have made this event possible. I hope you are finding today's sessions insightful, and I want to remind you that the learnings don't stop here. If you haven't already, you can become a PMA member or upgrade to an Access All Areas Pass to benefit from unlimited access to all today's content. What's more, you can continue the conversation in the PMA's Slack community. If you aren't already a member, then hop on over and join the discussions today. And remember, this is your chance to get involved. Please share your feedback and questions in the comments section for our speakers to answer. It really is that simple. Let's resume the sessions.
My name is Danny Scott Duke, and it's my pleasure to present to you The Futurist Developer, what product marketers need to know about engaging developer audiences. Just a little about me, my education, experience, and some hobbies. As you can see, I have a solid background in software and technical marketing with time spent as a product marketing manager. A little over a decade ago, I started to research developers because I wanted to understand how to best and most effectively communicate with them, because it was clear that our traditional strategies, tactics, and campaigns were not resonating with this particular audience. What I've learned, I'll share with you here today. Before crafting a developer strategy, you must understand that it requires a completely different approach. This is a unique audience, and although you'll use all of the skills and tools that you have in the product marketing core framework, the approach and the perspective will be different. These are just a few ways that developers are unique. Of course, developers are not a monolith like any other audience, but by and large, these are typical considerations you must have as you're crafting your strategy. I think one of the key takeaways here is the fact that developers can be adverse to traditional marketing. I don't want to say that developers hate marketing, but some of our typical tactics, such as analyst reports and long form content like ebooks, don't resonate with this audience. Perhaps it makes sense to stop considering developer marketing and really look at it from the developer experience. What you see in front of you is a breakdown of some of the traditional marketing strategies that that marketers employ, next to what the developer experience looks like. From the point of segmentation, within traditional marketing, we tend to segment audiences based on industries, focus markets, and regions. However, for developers, this is different. We can segment developer audiences by use cases, the programming languages that they use, their role or function, as well as region. Now, region has a unique nuance because although a developer may live in Brazil, for example, the work that they're doing is for customers and clients in Singapore. When we talk about segmenting developers by role and function, that means web developers have unique needs over mobile app developers, just as an example. In looking at content, as I mentioned before, long form content doesn't resonate with this audience. Instead, they prefer short form text and video content. And any content developed for developer audiences needs to be inspirational and educational. So what do I mean by that? Educational content, it consists of how your products can be used, whereas inspirational gives them ideas of real world use cases and how they may employ your products to fit their needs. When you develop content for other audiences, it can be aspirational and you can gate much of your premium content. That doesn't work for developers. You want to focus on ungated content such as blog articles. And whatever you produce needs to be focused on your technology and your products. Thought leadership for developers is mostly respected from internal developer evangelists and advocates because essentially they are developers. They also look to other developer externally, influencers and bloggers, as opposed to industry analysts or C-level executives. The kinds of things that you would promote and use for decision maker audiences don't work for developers. They want to hear from other developers. They also look to developer communities and forums for thought leadership. So they sort of feed off of each other and share information. And that's how you can gain thought leadership among these audiences. Really put your evangelists and your advocates out there to share their experiences, their knowledge, and to resonate and connect with other developers and your prospective customers. Now, when we talk about events, conferences and trade shows are the cornerstone of pretty much every marketing strategy. The difference with developers is that their interactions in your booth are expected to be more technical in nature, as opposed to conversations with sales staff. In addition, they look for the auxiliary hands-on experiences that come with many live events, such as hackathons and workshops. As you're developing and creating content or presentations for keynotes and workshops, make sure they're more on the technical side of content and really connect the dot between what you're offering and what attendees of those events have come to look for. When it comes to sales for developers, simple and standard pricing and self-serve experiences. And they want limited interactions with salespersons. And then when you talk about your products, typically when we describe our products to executives, we talk as we present high-level functions and features. Developers, they want to know what's under the hood, what makes it work, and what are the technical competitive advantages. I assume that if you're looking to build a developer strategy, you're trying to drive developer activity. That activity comes in two forms: awareness and interest, as well as acquisition and retention. Awareness and interest are the tactics and strategies that you use to drive developers to your website or to your developer portal. Acquisition and retention activity, this is what happens after your developers make it to your website. You want to acquire them, whether that means signing up for your newsletter or to receive company information, or driving them to your developer portal to register for an account so that they can experience your products. You want to make whatever sign-up process as frictionless as possible. Once they've signed up, you want to make it as intelligent and intuitive as possible for them to find what they've come to look for, whether that's APIs, SDKs, documentation, whatever it is. You want to make sure that developers have a good experience within your website or within your developer portal. Of course, once you've acquired them, you want to make sure developers are active and keep them active. That means giving them hands-on experiences. As always, make sure your documentation and your tutorials, code snippets, and anything else that you offer are as up to date as possible. There's nothing worse for a developer experience than for them to need help and to find out that the tools that they would typically use to get that help are out of date. Let's go a little bit deeper into the typical go-to-market strategy as it relates to crafting it to fit developer audiences. Developers as customers. The term developer can be a bit of a misnomer because we tend to think of developers as people that just sit around writing code all day, and that's not necessarily the case. Developers, as a title, can also include product managers, project managers, solution and systems architects, designers, and more. They all have the common background of understanding how software is built, how it works, and how it integrates within the tools that they use, and how they can use software to solve the problems that they have. Developers can work within and probably do work in the markets that you're focused on, your target markets, but they're not defined by that company or industry. Keep in mind that developers typically switch jobs every 18 to 24 months on average. Not every developer, but on average, every 18 to 24 months, they change jobs. Developers are in high demand, and you have to recognize that. Ideally, you want to speak to their needs so that you become their solution provider of choice, regardless of what industry they're working in. So for example, a mobile app developer may work in transportation now, but in 6 months when they change jobs, they'll be working in retail. They'll still be doing mobile app development work, which means some of the tools that they've used in the past, they'll want to employ in their new environment. And because of these job changes, developers can be segmented by use cases, programming languages, and functions. So JavaScript developers can be a segment depending on what your product offers. Something that's essential when thinking about crafting your developer strategy is to realize that developers are no longer at the end of the buying process, hence the term long-tail developers, which I really never use that term because it doesn't apply. Developers play a more significant role now throughout the process of identifying and selecting technologies for their businesses. In the role of an initiator, developers seek tools and solutions in order to meet the needs of their given project or product or problem at the time. They are also users and influencers when their upper management present them with software to be tested and to determine whether or not that software is a good fit, that software or product is a good fit for their particular organization or environment. And in many ways, developers can be decision makers. A wise person once told me that developers may not always be able to say yes to a product, but they can definitely say no. They can say no to products, solutions, tools that are cumbersome, difficult to use, or ones that they've had a poor experience with in the past. And you want to avoid that by keeping in mind, this is more about the developer experience than it is about developer marketing. As you develop the value propositions, understand that developers look for straightforward and straight to the point content. So avoiding fluff, jargon, and that which is the abstract. Your value propositions really need to speak to three specific things. One, what does your product do? What are the pain points that it addresses? What are the needs that it will solve or the problems that it will solve? And what is the actuality? So don't speak in terms of future functions and features. What does it do right now? It also helps to provide real world use cases. The second, how does it work? I like to think of developers as mechanics, as a type of mechanic, because they want to see not only what does the product do, but how does it work? How does it interact? What powers it? And how will it impact and influence the other products that are used around it? And then finally, who uses it? So establishing credibility goes a long way to acquiring and retaining developer audiences and developer users. And in order to do that, credibility can be gathered by establishing use cases and demonstrating other users of your products. Those users don't always have to be from big companies. Like I said before, the community consists of evangelists as well as external influencers and other developers within the developer community. Therefore, establishing users and use cases from those sources can go a long way to bringing about the credibility you need in order to gather more users for your products. When I first started focusing on developer audiences, it was clear that some of our traditional methods of engaging developers wasn't working. So the things that we would employ for C-level executives just didn't work for developers, again, such as analyst reports. I started to understand that developers have different needs and they go to different locations and outlets for information, for engagement, and for finding new solutions. So while some of the traditional methods work, such as search engine optimization and paid search, as I mentioned before, employing things like paid pay-per-click campaigns and place content need to be within publications that focus specifically on developers' interests and needs. And some of those I've listed here. Email can work for developers. However, as I said before, it needs to be opt-in and non-intrusive, which means not too frequent. And it also needs to be relevant and straightforward. So making sure that your direct email campaigns and direct email outreach have some sort of relevancy to product information, what's going on within the developer community, as well as events and topical subjects will help go a long way to retaining readership. Another unique aspect of developer audiences, and I've mentioned this before, is the fact that they have a community focus, or they have a community, a penchant for working and listening to their community peers. So looking at some of the communities that are out there, such as GitHub and /data, you want to make sure that you have a presence within those channels. Now, not necessarily from a strictly marketing perspective. And when I say that, that means giving your evangelists and technical experts the opportunity to engage with your prospective customers, as well as existing customers, through those community channels. Social media is also big with developers in ways that might not necessarily work for upper level decision makers. Channels such as Reddit and Twitter have large developer communities and many opportunities for you to not only interact with your prospective and existing users, but also for you to listen to what's going on within their world. This will help you continuously craft content and messaging to fit what's going on with them and what their interests are. Being aware of these non-traditional options and opportunities really can give you a competitive edge over your competitors, because not everyone understands the world of developer marketing when it comes to stepping outside of the box and reaching them within these new spaces that haven't really been touched when it comes to decision maker or corporate marketing strategies. Positioning for developers, this can be a little tricky. Understand that positioning is a marathon. It is definitely not a sprint and will continuously evolve over time due to the nature of your products, as well as the nature of the developer universe. Things change on a regular basis, and you want to make sure that your positioning and your messaging and everything that you're doing to target developers evolves along with it. So as you're looking at positioning, consider the market fit. When I say that, I mean, there's a really good chance that your products will be used amongst other tools and solutions. So what's the position there? How well will it integrate with those products within the different organizations that you're targeting? How well will your products augment the skill set of the developers you're targeting, or help them build new skills? And then think in terms of technical application. Again, where will your products be used? What will they be used to achieve? And how do you communicate that in the best way possible for developers? Again, don't speak in terms of abstract, consider the real practical applications. I also want you to take a long look at what your competitors are doing. Don't shy away from what the differentiators are between what you offer and what your competitors offer, and be honest and upfront about that. Even if your competitors offer, let's say, a better product, the experience for developers with your product could be better, and that could be your huge advantage. And when we talk about competitors, don't just consider the big ones. What we tend to see within corporate environments is that they consider their competitors to be other large companies, as opposed to smaller startups, which they tend to ignore. Those startups come out of nowhere and they disrupt entire markets. Think of Uber and Bird Scooters as an example. So as you're looking at positioning and you're looking to craft your positioning, pay attention to the entire landscape, not just the landscape that seems most obvious. The distribution model for developers doesn't have to be complicated. For the most part, there are 3 basic ways to make sure developers have access to the products that you offer. First is direct. Pretty straightforward. This is when developers come to your developer portal, sign up, and consume through your own channel. Make sure that this is a great experience for them. Make sure that, first of all, you're driving your traffic to your developer portal from your awareness and acquisition strategies. And then once they're there, make sure there's alignment between the messaging in your awareness and acquisition strategies and what they see on the developer portal. Make sure it's a good experience, like I said. So it should be well organized and intuitive. They should be able to search for what they're looking for, and make sure, and again, ensure that documentation is updated. Ideally, developers want self-serve options. They like working in their own time, in their own frame, and self-serve gives them the opportunity to do that, because the name of the game when it comes to software development is speedy, quick development and faster time to market. I mean, that's what agile software development practices are all about. And you want to make sure that you're in line with what their expectations are. Marketplaces, for most software offerings and most developer offerings, marketplaces are essential, because you want sort of an ambient location ambient availability for developer acquisition. What does that mean? Okay, ambient is be wherever they are. Marketplaces are where developers are. Consider AWS marketplaces, Azure, IBM, Red Hat. There are numerous marketplaces out there, and they operate pretty much like a Target or a Walmart. It's where developers go that are where they can find the APIs, SDKs, and other tools that they're looking for. They're convenient and familiar. So when you place your products within the marketplaces, let's say APIs within AWS, you want to maximize that channel as much as possible, as much detail as possible. Make sure that the documentation is updated. If you can incorporate code snippets and tutorial videos, do as much as you can, because again, this is where developers go to find the tools that they need. Another thing to keep in mind is that within some corporate environments, their developers must use marketplaces in order to purchase and incorporate new tools into their technology stack. So, for example, there are developers that are required to use IBM Marketplace. You want to make sure that if you want those developers, that your products are there within reach, where they are required to where they're required to go in order to get new tools and solutions. And of course, there are partners and resellers. So these are value-added resellers, ISRs, ISVs, etc. In any case, regardless of what your partner or reseller model looks like, you want to enable them as much as possible to represent your products in the best way. That means giving them proper technical training, all of the sales enablement tools and information they need, and then ongoing support. Again, documentation is key. So as you build your distribution model, there needs to be a regular cadence of documentation review in order to make sure that it's accurate and that developers are having the best experience that they can. And finally, pricing. Pricing for developers doesn't need to be complicated. In fact, you may want to begin with a freemium or trial model. This gives developers the opportunity to experience and interact with your products without any commitment. Then from there, give them optional upgrades that require payments, such as additional usage or storage. As part of your strategy, you want to create a path to paying conversion model. And once those developers convert to paying customers, keep the pricing structure simple and very straightforward. These are just a few examples: per user, tiered, module, usage-based, very simple, and what developers have come to expect. Be sure to check out your competitors' pricing models. Whether it's cheaper pricing or pricing that's more straightforward and simple, you can get a competitive edge just through your pricing alone to accompany your products, of course. No matter what you do, work to remove the contact us requirement for developers. Again, they want to move at their own pace and they want things to be easily accessible. When they have to contact anyone in order to find out the basics of what to expect for pricing, that becomes a friction process and not something that developers are really open to. Again, developers want to operate as smoothly as possible, and the need to contact someone just to find out how much your products cost creates speed bumps that they're not really open to. And the last note on pricing, I'll also say that if possible, make your pricing public, or at least easy to find, so that developers know what to expect when it comes to purchasing your product offerings. I hope that you've enjoyed this as much as I have. Thank you for your time.
Talk with any product-focused team at an enterprise technology company and they'll share the same story. They know they need a vibrant user community to spur product adoption and growth. But what they don't know is the best way to build, manage, and grow one. How do they connect with current and prospective users at scale? Do they build their own community? Do they join existing communities? There's an easier way. Collectives on Stack Overflow helps you unlock the power of your community. You can reach and engage millions of developers on Stack Overflow and connect with those interested in your technology. Share knowledge and support users of your products, and drive growth through actionable data and insights. Ready to unlock the power of your community? Visit collectivesonstackoverflow.com today.
Hello, wherever you are joining us from today, I want to say a huge welcome to our global community. We hope you're enjoying the Developer Marketing Summit. I also want to send out an extra special thank you to all our sponsors, partners, and speakers who together have made this event possible. I hope you are finding today's sessions insightful, and I want to remind you that the learnings don't stop here. If you haven't already, you can become a PMA member or upgrade to an Access All Areas Pass to benefit from unlimited access to all today's content. What's more, you can continue the conversation in the PMA's Slack community. If you aren't already a member, then hop on over and join the discussions today. And remember, this is your chance to get involved. Please share your feedback and questions in the comments section for our speakers to answer. It really is that simple. Let's resume the sessions.
So I'm Jane Pooley. I'm based just outside London in a place called Windsor. And yes, the royal family do live there sometimes. I work for a company called Keyloop, who are focused predominantly on creating technology to make everything about buying and owning a car better. And as part of that, my responsibility, I have just taken ownership and been promoted as the company marketing director. But prior to that, I was the product marketing director, and I've worked in multiple disciplines across marketing and multiple businesses for 20 plus years. So I've got a lot of experience and wealth of experience in terms of looking at personas and how we utilize those across the buying journey, from awareness all the way through that sales funnel to support our customers in life as well. So very keen today to share my experiences and learn other experiences.
Awesome. Let's go over to Ankit.
Hey, Sam, nice to be here. So I'm Ankit Shah. I lead our solutions marketing practice at QuickBase. So my background is actually in computer engineering, but I'm super passionate about really understanding customer challenges and helping develop solutions to help solve for our customers. So this topic is near and dear to me. I'm super excited about that. And so for those that don't know, QuickBase actually provides a no-code operational agility platform that enables organizations to improve their operations through sort of real-time insights and automations across complex processes and disparate systems. So really exciting time to be here.
Awesome. And then Martin, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Marty Bacall, Product Marketing Director for Open Legacy. I've been working with developers and development teams for a long time in different roles, different companies. Open Legacy itself, we generate and expose legacy APIs from legacy systems, from mainframes and midframes and things like that, in a no-code, low-code, and also full-code, different types of formats in different ways. But it's working closely with application designers and developers.
Awesome. And I'm Sam Richard. I'm moderating this panel. I work at OpenView Venture Partners as a Senior Director of Growth. I specialize specifically in product-led growth. That is where the product sort of works as a bottoms-up discovery mechanisms for folks to start to adopt product more broadly. And I focus heavily on developer marketing and developer-focused tooling. So it's nice to have everyone here. I think the first question we really want to go over is, what are some of the key features of the developer customer demographic, and how are they different from the usual B2B audience? What are their expectations? What are their buying behaviors? How do they look different? And Marty, I'm going to call on you because it sounds like you've been really focused on this space. If you want to give us a timeline of how things have changed or when you started noticing things changing, that would be awesome.
Well, sure. Well, I've been in, to be honest, I've been in different industries, all focused on developers over the years. And back in the day, it was much more about code and writing code and about generating code, and tools, helped you that did that. We generated code for things, and then everyone was always looking at that deeper dive into it. Over the years, as no code and low code have kind of come in, that sort of changed it to, you don't have to have all developers. You can have people who are called designers who maybe don't know as much about that and don't have to work in that as much. And we've seen the shift towards people because they want people to understand the business, to actually and the business needs that they're building, to actually be more involved in the process. And they're not going to understand, back then, C++ code, or whether it's COBOL code or Java code, expecting them to understand it that way and have to write that slows everything down. So we've seen a change, but they're still technical people. They have to understand how to design something, how to build something, and that still makes them different than a consumer of a mobile app or something like that.
And Jane, you talked a lot about personas. Marty talked a little bit about how, we tend to group developers together. How do you start to sort of identify the differences and just the holistic view of developers and marketing to developers? And how do you separate them out separately?
So I guess I come from it from a slightly different angle in terms of trying to understand who we're trying to reach, which buyer personas they may be. And I guess, there has been a bit of a change curve in recent years in terms of there's more kind of technology or data emerging personas that we need to be targeting in multiple industries, not just the industry I work in today. And it's understanding them in a different sense, because the traditional buyers that we have today are not the same. They have different behaviors. They're easier in some ways to sell to. And when you start to get into a more technical buyer, you've got to also educate your internal teams as well in terms of how to sell to them, how to market to them. And buyer personas come in really helpful from that perspective, because it helps educate people, but it also means we can better target those individuals. And it's reaching out, trying to speak to those individuals. It's doing some desk-based research in terms of pulling together those profiles. And you can pick that up from multiple sources via Google by searching, job descriptions and that sort of thing. There's lots of articles on challenges of developers or chief technical officers and so forth in different businesses that can be pulled through to create those buyer personas at a basic level. And then it's talking to your customers to get a better, closer understanding, talking to those at the front line, the sales teams, to get that visibility. And the other trick that I've used elsewhere that I'll be introducing at Keyloop is in any communications that you put out to customers, ask a couple of questions, 2 or 3 questions. They could be about anything. They could be getting their points of view on something, and include that, and then keep building those profiles and keeping them refreshed and up to date. Those would be a couple of tips that I would use to building those personas.
And then Ankit, QuickBase is very applicable because it's a no-code platform. How do you extend those personas to less technical users, folks who might not necessarily consider themselves developers?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point, Sam, and it's something even Marty alluded to is, right, like our buyer personas, because of the platform that we offer, is really targeted to those in the business. So we're not targeting, primarily those buyers in IT that do have a technical background. And so our buyer personas, to an extent, we have different flavors of those, but a couple of them are really going after those in the line of business that don't have that technical audience, that see themselves as problem solvers, they're embedded in the business and really deeply understand the process and have the mindset of really improving and digitizing and automating a lot of their processes. So for us, it's really all about, how do you better understand somebody who doesn't have the technical background, is building a solution on our platform to meet their needs, but is not a developer. And so for us, we oftentimes, we've got our buyers that are the line of business, the head of a particular business, but then we see these folks as these problem solvers, more so as influencers, because they oftentimes are somebody that we would talk to early on and engage them and really understand the pain that they have, because they are closest to the problem, and so they have the willingness to solve it. And so we have to better understand them as influencers more so than buyers. I think across our segments, sometimes they are buyers. Most of the time, they're a very strong influence. So that's sort of how we differentiate across our segments.
Yeah, that's helpful. So one of the things that I've covered in my research is sort of how developer-focused software is sort of on the bleeding edge of product-led growth and sort of this try before you buy mentality, which sort of separates out the personas between users and buyers, because ultimately you're going to start everyone off as a user if they can try the product first. Marty, have you experienced any sort of differentiation between the user and buyer personas as you've gotten more granular?
Yes, very much so. And I do think, though, it's been a little hard because we are in process of releasing our low code, no code product right now. Before that, we had a full code on-prem type product with a full POC. Even there, you could see the user persona versus the buyer persona, because you had either the designer or the developer using the product, the platform itself during our POCs. And then you had like an enterprise architect, CTO, those type were more like the buyer persona involved in the process. But now that we have one where you can do a trial right in the cloud and it's more focused on those no code and low code type people, I think we're going to see even more of a differentiation there, because they can go just try it, but they aren't necessarily the person who's going to buy it, because it's about how many APIs you generate, all these other things. And we're going to need, either CXO or at least like architect or development manager type of buyer persona, which means you have to sell the usability, the productivity to the user, and then you have to sell sort of the fact that it fits into their architecture to an enterprise architect, and the fact that it's going to help them modernize what they're doing and do all those other parts involved, and that it could be multi-tenant, working with different groups, those types of things, much more to the buyer persona. And you have to weigh both of those things.
Yeah. You know, one question I have for the broader group is, how are you incorporating these ideas into your marketing strategy? If you are separating between the buyer and the user, what does that look like from a tactical perspective? What is the sales enablement materials? What does the team building look like? Sort of like, who's doing it? Jane, I know you're sort of the one-woman marketing team, but you know, if you were to have your dream team, or you've had this in your past experience, what does that team makeup look like for you?
So I do have a team,
Okay.
and we are starting to look at building the right tools for sales through that sales funnel. In a previous company, that's exactly what we put in place, or that's what my team put in place. So we not only built the personas, but we both buyer and user personas, but we mapped them to the product portfolio. Really important to do that. And then we grouped them accordingly, but we talked about them also in terms of grouping them in industry as well. So we can talk about their challenges that they have and why the product solutions would be best suited for them. So we didn't just understand the buyer personas and their motivations and their goals and their challenges. We kind of position them in terms of what the outcomes of our products and solutions could provide. And that started to build the basis of a really strong toolkit for sales. Up until that point, sales were used to going in and selling to one type of buyer persona, and we were challenging them to speak to more people. And some of those more people were more technically orientated. And this toolkit enabled them to do this, enabled them to open up the dialogue and the conversation. And some of the training and the workshops that we did with them was, we introduced personas, we gave them a persona they knew and loved and had, you know, long-standing relationships. They got it, they understood it, they related to the personas. And then we gave them a scenario in terms of prepare a sales pitch. You're going to talk to a customer for the first time about this product, and they would build that. And then after they put that together, we then introduced 2 new personas to them that they'd never come across before. So they had confidence that the personas were correct, because there was a first persona that they really knew and knew well. And effectively what that meant is they had to adapt how they positioned and sold using the material that marketing had produced, from sales slides to product sheets and so forth. And it really worked and it took off. And that's something that I'm looking to bring into my new organization, because I think it's a method that works well. And I think if you've got the salespeople really believing in those personas, whether they're buyer personas, user personas, or even influencer personas, I would certainly encourage to look at influencer personas, then you've got the basis of a really strong methodology to actually go out and really address the needs of those customers and start to get that feedback in. So you're constantly refining those personas as you go. And in terms of building marketing campaigns, you can be much more targeted, much more focused, because you've got that mapping and alignment to the portfolio. You understand their challenges, you understand their industry, you can be much more specific. So it has a much stronger way, particularly from a B2B perspective, to address those needs of customers. It can also be applied, and I have applied it to B2C as well. So it can work both ways. I think the more you know about the customer, the more you prepare your teams about the customer, the better the result.
Interesting. And then Ankit, how do you apply this tactically to the builders, or the sort of users, the non-technical folks who are sort of entering your orbit early on?
Yeah, so I think we look at users in 3 different categories. So because like I was saying, it's a no-code platform where you actually build a solution. And so we have 3 different user personas. We've got our builders, who are, those that don't have a technical background, but have the pain and want to be able to solve them. We call them builders. And so we actually talk to those folks a lot more than any of our other personas. Some of the other ones are the administrators of the platforms, and sometimes they're the same folks that are builders that are building the solution. They may be building multiple applications to build a solution. but then there are administrators of the platform, right, which is a separate end user persona, which is also oftentimes we actually talk to that audience as well. But the third one, which is really that end user who's actually using the application or the solution that the builder has built, we actually don't talk to the end users at all. So in terms of, going back to your question about, marketing tactics and content, it is our content, especially for those developers, is very much focused on the builders and the administrators. We actually never talk to end users, and that's actually one of the things we learned early on is customers didn't want us to talk to our end users. They actually wanted to talk to those that are building a solution. So our programs and campaigns are very much focused around, if you're an existing customer base, we're focused on talking to the builders and the administrators within the end user categories.
Interesting. And do you have sort of like the notion of a funnel that switches them over from that end user to that buyer, and like what triggers that?
Yeah, so we actually do a couple of things. We've just started doing some specific tactics around hackathon. So what we would do is, depending on the size of the accounts, we actually bring in customers where we see a significant interest across different parts of the business that they may not using our platform. And so we actually bring the builders in as well as the end users into a hackathon where end users feel like, oh boy, I have this particular problem and I want to be able to solve it, but I want to be able to actually do it myself as opposed to having to rely on somebody who's a builder. So we engage those folks in some of these tactics, these hackathon events that help us identify like those that are end users that may be actually builders. Like we kind of have a specific program that we think about trying to go focus on those guys as well, those folks as well. So it's very much targeted through some of these tactics like hackathon, and we do some other lessons learned sessions within these accounts as well, where they come in and kind of share like, here's what we're doing. And as we see folks engaging with that kind of events, we start identifying like these are actually, we are grooming them from being end users to really be the builders, because they want to participate in solving their challenges as opposed to continuously relying on somebody else.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well,
hackathons
so switching gears a little bit. Yeah.
Sorry, Sam. I was just going to say, hackathons are really they can spark so much interest as well. I mean, we've used them in multiple ways. We've used them in terms of getting fresh ideas into the business from a business development perspective, a product development perspective, utilizing a university network. And that's been successful for us in terms of pushing in that new ideas as well. But also equally, we're using the customers as well themselves to be part of that hackathon as well, to come up with the ideas or the solution. In some cases, many cases, it has been the solution.
Yeah.
Well, and so switching gears here, I think one of the biggest problems I hear from sort of up and coming folks who are specializing in personas and product marketing is, getting it across the board with the rest of the organization. So socializing these personas, making sure that they're actively used. What are some tactics you've used in the past, Marty, to get that cohesive usage across the board and make sure you're not sort of in a silo on your own?
That's a good question. I mean, you can be in a silo on your own sometimes if you're not careful. I do try to, first of all, show it to the salespeople and have regular meetings with them. I've been doing that a lot, specifically for some of the new hires, for some of the different people. I also, whenever we are building something that's a marketing campaign or something like that, I say, well, what persona is this working with? Well, like, let's make sure we go after a specific persona. It's okay if we choose a different one on a different campaign if we're targeting a couple different groups. And by the way, it's not just personas in terms of, we talked about the roles people play, but it also could be like industries, right? We target a lot of banking, we target a lot of insurance, but we also target some other industries as well. So the question is, how those types of things also sort of fit into that whole thing. I mean, is it a persona? Does that persona change when it's a different industry? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, depending upon what the needs are and things like that. So I try to build it into the marketing campaigns so people know about it, and I try to train people on it, particularly sales, marketing people, things like that, but also others. And then I sort of make sure it's sort of germinates from there. Luckily, my company currently, I mean, we've done things as a group for personas and things like that. So we've at least had some of that thought process.
What about product, Marty? Do you ever sort of train product on these things too?
Yeah, I didn't include product. I probably should have. I'm a former product manager myself for a long time. So I talk to product all the time about the fact that, for instance, this new product is going to shift which type of personas we do, and we can't just build product. We have to think about that as part of it. They're pretty in tune with that right now, but it does take those discussions on and again, and are we changing this, and are we thinking about that persona as we build out product, and also the content that we actually work on together.
And then Ankit, I mean, I know QuickBase is huge. How are you getting buy-in? Is it more systematic, or do you feel like you're still sort of lobbying different parts of the organization?
Yeah, I think one of the good things that I saw within the organization a couple of years ago was when we were going through some transformation within our org, in really having a much better point of view on our buyer personas, it actually really started at the leadership level. So it was really started with alignment between sales, marketing, and product. And that's where it sort of, there was a very strong handshake that says, look, we are embarking on refining our buyer personas. We have to think about, okay, how would we activate what we learned from that, right? Because it's not just like, hey, we're going to go in front of sales and tell them here are the buyer personas. Like, let's make sure that we're activating that information in seller tools that we're building for them, right? So, be it things like their talk tracks, their email sequences, right? Their battle cards, like all of that. And I think that's where you want at least at the chief revenue officer or a VP of sales, whoever the head of sales is, like, hey, this is how we will translate what insights we are developing for those buyer personas into actual tools that your reps are going to use, right? Because it's oftentimes very theoretical, like, hey, we've developed these buyer personas, we're going to go out and talk to you about them. And then sellers are like, okay, how do I operationalize all of this information that you just shared? So we actually started at the top and said, hey, this is what it means for your team, for sales. This is what it means for a product. This is what it means for marketing. And so once it starts there, then it starts trickling out. Okay, now I'm going to go through, refining our buyer personas. And there's a process that we use. Once we develop those personas, we actually created that seller's toolkit, toolkit for product, toolkit for marketing. And we sort of operationalized and activated that. So that's sort of the process that we established. And I would say we've learned a ton from that. There are parts that have gone really, really well, and there are parts that needs continuous reinforcement, which is always the case at any organization.
And then Jane, what is your perspective on this? You're a little bit smaller. Is that a pro or con for you in socializing this across the board?
Previous company was huge, and
right.
Yeah, I mean, that was previous company was Cantal when we introduced the persona, so that was really challenging. But I guess introducing a persona that they knew well was a really good way to get buy-in, and then introducing the broader personas, which helped. I'm using the same tactic at the new company. Because I think that will work really, really well with them. And it's a little bit more, I think there is a bit of confusion between a user persona and a buyer persona. So we've got to do a little bit of education there as well, and why they're so important and intrinsic to each other. So you can't really have a user persona with no buyers, right? Because otherwise you can build something great for a user, but if you've got no buyer attached to it, you're not going to sell anything. So I think that's quite important to get that buy-in. But we are doing some work. I've been doing some work this afternoon, actually, in terms of doing some talk tracks and battle cards already. So we're starting to get there and introduce the buyer personas. And in the last month of introducing a couple of new products with some clearer talk track and position and messaging specific to those buyer personas has really helped sales. And sales have started to come back going, this is working, this is helping us sell, and that's what you want to hear. So we're on the right track. There's still a long way to go. There's still a lot of training to do in articulation and refining of those personas, but we're getting there.
I'd love to hear you guys' sort of point of view and your experience on whether or not you've been able to build any sort of tracks for these personas, these user or buyer personas, specifically in the product itself. Have you sort of worked with the product teams or anything like that to create specific user journeys? Yeah, Jane, what does that look like for you?
So for me, I've had years of experience in doing this, and worked for some really good organizations who are very customer centric in their design approach and utilizing the buyer persona throughout their entire journey. And one particular journey that's always resonated with me, and I've taken it to the last 3 organizations I've worked for, is learn, buy, get, use, support, help, and then leave. And you take customers through that journey in terms of how how they learn about your brand and what's the experience and what's the interactions and the different touch points, and thinking about that from each buyer persona, or each persona, it could be the user persona as well. And then how we then sell to them, how they then go through that buy purchase journey. It can be very different. So some very heavy technical products that I've had the pleasure of working on in the past have meant, it could be a 6 to 18 month sales cycle process. And I've worked on products that are a click and buy and it's out the door sort of thing. So it's very different journeys in terms of that. The important one, however, I think going through that buyer journey, don't forget the leave bit would be my steer, because the leave experience, if you make that a really good leave experience, trust me, when they go somewhere else, they'll come back, because they know if the leave experience is good, then the onboarding experience will be better. So I think that's one thing that I have learned, but that's something I've taken with me in building that experience end to end, and thinking about the interactions, the touch points, the challenges customers will have. And obviously that leads then to any barriers that they may have in terms of or objection handling as you go through that. It'll also help with how you position it against the competitors as well. So really understanding that journey helps with tick lots of multiple boxes in terms of helping get the right traction, support, and sale for that product.
Marty and Kit, have you guys had any success building the personas into the product as well, or do you feel like that's more rare in the space still?
I mean, I think I've had some success more in the new product, so we're going to see how it all affects it in the future. Part of that is we have a couple different distinct parts of what we do. We sort of have more or less, I'd say, a loop where we acquire assets from the legacy system in an automated way. And that's a different user, because a lot of times that may be a mainframe developer or an integration person who knows the COBOL files that they can sort of add in, and we automatically parse it. And then the other part is the designer persona, and that's the one where we literally have a flow engine where you can sort of build something and then choose whether you want no code, low code, and or even full code. And that may depend upon slightly different user personas, because we understand the needs in different ways. We also think about how our users are going to do it if they're doing it through a partner, because some of them just want to acquire the assets and then want to plug into, let's say, a Boomi or something like that, and do all their flows within their tool, which is fine. We're just sort of bringing in the assets or applying existing API contracts to what we're building. So we try to think through what a partner expects us to map to versus what our users and the different types of users versus sort of the people working with the legacy itself. And those are all different user personas that we have to deal with in many cases for what we're doing.
Ankit, how about yourself?
Yeah, we actually did some preliminary work, I'd say a couple of years ago, around just the user journey. I think we need to come back and kind of do some more work there. I think that needs to be a bit of a focus for us. That has not been the focus for us in the past couple of years. I will say what we did do, we did have a concerted initiative around the trial experience. And that was super helpful for us, because that's like the very first, well, I wouldn't say with the first touch point, like that's the first time they're actually getting their hands, with the product. So what does that journey look like? What does that trial journey look like for a builder? Or oftentimes it could even be a user that may not really be turned into a builder. So we did some work there early on. I think we still need to kind of come back and build out some customer journeys for those end user personas.
Do you guys feel like I mean, this is probably a trick question, but do you feel like personas are something that you're one and done with, or do you feel like it's iterative? And how often do you iterate?
All the time. Well, not all the time. I think you know, I'll go back to the tip I shared earlier. You know, any form of communication or interaction with customers, if you have some golden questions that you want to ask those questions, because that will help continuously refining those personas. I know from experience over the last 18 months with the pandemic, those buyer personas behaviors have changed. And their own perceptions and the way that they work and their goals and the challenges have shifted. So the description I had of those personas 2 years ago won't stand as in true, you know, won't stand now. So you have to move with the times, and anything can happen, which is also why it's important to keep an eye on the industry that your customers live and breathe and work in, particularly if it's B2B customers, or if it's consumer, looking at those consumer trends, you know, what's happening, what isn't happening, what could impact and influence a change in the shift in different behaviors that may relate and have a knock-on impact to the success of your products and solutions.
Let me ask you guys another question. Do you feel like the personas will shift again after COVID?
Who knows?
Like,
I mean,
yeah. I mean, to Janie's point, like we don't know, and that's one of the reasons why we are constantly, you know, reassessing those personas on an ongoing basis. Like I totally agree with Janie's point. Like it's not a once and done thing, right? You build it, and we actually just started developing this practice. Like, hey, once we built it and we've activated that through our sales and marketing, our go-to-market functions, one of the things we have started to incorporate is like we've got to have some feedback mechanisms put in place with our sellers, within our marketing programs, and the broad market and customer research that we do on a quarterly basis. Like we should be looking at this, in fact, even including win-loss analysis. Like we started developing this practice where we're triangulating and assessing that feedback and identifying, okay, are there any changes in our buyer personas based on all of that insights? And if so, how do you activate that, right? So that kind of goes back into, well, do we need to refresh our buyer personas? Do we need to refresh our seller tools? And once you do those things, so you've got to activate it with your sales force. You have to do it with your marketing teams, right? So to us, it's very much an iterative process. And right now we're being very aspirational. We could do it on a quarterly basis. You know, we'll find out. That may be too far. Yeah. Too big of a stretch, and we may have to go once every 4 to 6 months or so, but that's what we're aspiring to do.
And I guess to add on to that a little bit, I mean, I agree with what everyone else here said, that you have to kind of constantly be doing it to some extent, whether or not you're presenting it on a quarterly basis or something like that. And I mean, I'm also talking to analysts all the time because they help me understand the market, the different places. I ask them about personas all the time. Who's building the APIs? Who's doing this? I kind of know, but it's good to hear from them what they think and what they think the shifts are. So I mean, I'm on regular calls with them. I take notes from that, and then I try to figure out a way to coalesce that and maybe change that into something in messaging I'm using. I read reports on it all the time, and I try to understand what do people think about this. Where is the shift? I also agree there was a huge shift during COVID, and I think there will be a slight shift maybe back or something, but I don't know how much. I mean, it partially is the fact that everyone all of a sudden became remote. I mean, I've been remote all along, but there've been a lot of people who went remote who used to work in development teams. Are they going back or aren't they? We don't really know yet. Some companies they will, some companies they won't. Banks are trying to force them back. So we'll see. In that industry, maybe that's going to happen, but in other industries, it may not.
Yep, that's super fair. Well, I'm going to do one bonus question. What do you guys feel like is the prediction for personas and for this space, this developer focused space over the next year? And Martin, maybe you hit the nail on the head, and the fact is maybe we don't know. But what is your gut telling you? And Marty, you can go first.
Sure. I mean, I think Ankit's going to agree with me on this, but low code, no code, that whole thing is sort of taking over. I mean, it's taking time, and there's still some people who like having some full code, but it's all about productivity, and it's all about getting things done at the speed you have with the right designs for what you're building. For me, it's less about necessarily moving off a mainframe per se. It's about building tooling and building stuff that end users actually need in a reasonable format. And people are tired of the fact that people say, well, I need full flexibility and I have to write code to do that and this and that. They're like, well, then we can't maintain it. It doesn't work. Right. And I know I kind of stole it, probably what Ankit's going to say, but he can add to that easily enough.
Yeah. I mean, I can build on that, Marty, because that's a really good point, right? I think IT organizations are realizing that they cannot meet the needs, the ever-changing needs of the business, right? And they have limited resources. They have, limited developers. And so I think progressive CIOs are recognizing, for me to meet the needs of my business, how can I start thinking about increasing the pool of those developers, right? Like if I already have shortage in acquiring new developers to meet the needs, the only way I can meet the needs of the business is, can I increase the size, increase the pool of those developers? And you do it through those that are in the business. So for us, those are shifting very much to what the buyer personas are going to look like, where those that are, very close to the problem, want to be able to solve it themselves, want to have the flexibility to move fast, right? And it's not just business drive. I mean, to an extent, business wants to drive at the pace that they want to, but they also see as a strong IT partnership, right? They've got to make sure that, IT's bought in early on, that they are developers. And in fact, when we look at our customer base and just our builders, I would say 1/3, if not more, our builders are actually in IT. So these are technical developers. And so we are seeing stronger partnership between IT and business using no-code, low-code platforms. And I couldn't agree with you, Marty. I think that's where we're headed.
Well, that's the whole term BizOps, right? Which is kind of coming from DevOps. It's the next phase into BizOps. I mean, interrupt. I know that. But that's the thought process behind DevOps is now established. Now BizOps is the next kind of one coming in.
Yeah, and we're on the other side. We're on the other side. So, well, not the other side. We're kind of still developing the DevOps, and it's an industry that is starting to get more digital, I guess is the right description. And we've relied very heavily on the IT teams to work with us to do the development. But as we are starting to launch new applications deeper into the client organizations, then we have to go the other way. We have to start putting in their hands the ability to self-serve and build themselves. So they've got that their ability to use without adding more pressure to the IT teams. So for us, it's evolving. But by the sounds of Martin and Ankit, I think the direction that you guys are going in right now, that's where we'll be going. So I might be calling you guys for some tips soon.
Well, I mean, I can only speak for myself. I mean, all of our tools have to be part of DevOps. I mean, they have to be automated and part of the process. So DevOps is still there, alive, and getting stronger. I'm just starting to see business start to be involved in that DevOps process.
Yeah.
So all that makes sense. It's all a continuum in my mind.
It's tough too, because there's really no best way to do things established yet. Like even the portfolio companies and the larger companies that I talk to, there's no clear winner. So I feel like we're really in this stage of innovation, and we just have to keep experimenting as well.
It just keeps changing. It's like the personas, everything keeps changing. What you think is solid today is just turned to quicksand the next day. So it's adapting, and I think it is that adaptation that you've got to keep up with.
Right. Gone are the days of just bringing your toolbox and being able to apply it at multiple organizations, for sure.
I think it relates to any discipline in any part of the organization, whether you're in finance or IT or marketing or product. There are things that are hitting us so rapidly and so quickly right now that everybody's constantly in this evolving change, which makes it quite hard to pinpoint those personas, which is why you just can't. You have to continue to update and evolve and revise.
It's sort of that 80-20 rule, right? As long as you get it close, people can leverage it a lot. I mean, I never consider them complete. and
Yeah.
they're going to evolve anyways past there, and then we're going to make another adjustment and hopefully get, still be at 80% because
Yeah.
they'll have adjusted and we'll have adjusted, and rather than going down to 50% or something.
And they have to be 80% right, because you're never going to get it 100% right if you're across multiple markets like we are.
Sure.
So you have to almost strip out the cultural differences when you're doing your personas, and then put that back in again when you come to do your marketing in local countries, right? Otherwise, you'll end up with multiple versions, and it's not just to Martin's point. You might have the same buyer persona that kind of fits across multiple industries, but there'll be some nuances that flip the challenges or the goals slightly that would be different. So you would then look at positioning the same product slightly differently, even though on paper they sound the same, but actually they're not because of those nuances.
Well, I mean, sorry, okay, you go.
I was just going to add to what both of you said about it being evolving, because I think it's so awesome to see that like everybody here is on the same page. What I often find is actually educating the rest of the org about it, that these are constantly evolving, and you should have that mindset. Like, look, this is what we know about this persona at this given time based on the market conditions. And who knows, conditions will change in the next 3 to 6 months, and we should be okay to adapt to those. And if we don't, we're just gonna not survive. So that mindset needs to happen. I think we have to do a much better job of educating the rest of the org around it.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because for me, when we think about like regulatory is one of the things we deal with a lot, how people map to regulatory. And a few years ago, it was all about GDPR with things like right to be forgotten. Now, California just instituted rules that are with the right to be forgotten, and Oregon has instituted or is in the process of instituting a lot of other states. So all of a sudden, we're seeing the exact same thing. Now, all of a sudden, the U.S. cares about it, and Europe is basically done with it, right? If you talk to them about that, they're sort of like, we've already had to comply to that.
I know, we're in phase 2 now.
But now doing instant payments, right? Yeah, Europe's at least for banking is instant payments now. Yeah. That's the big thing for banking. So which hasn't gotten, the U.S. has done a little bit of, but it's not required yet. So we'll see that phase through all the other regions soon enough. So Europe in many cases is a bellwether for those types of regulations.
Mm.
Well, and so we're coming up on time, but I'd love to go through and say one key takeaway you'd love this audience to have from each of you on developer personas and understanding the segmentation and demographics there. So Jane, I'll make you go first again. It'll be your last time.
I've got to go to one. I guess
just one.
Bring them to life, make them as realistic as possible, and you get by them. If you have to go to the extreme of creating user persona rooms in your office so that people can walk into that room and feel that persona, then go to that. Then do whatever you can do to make them feel real.
All right, Ankit, how about yours?
I'm going to add +1 to what Janie said, because we actually did that. We actually printed these massive posters and we just put them throughout our office when we were starting to activate those personas. So if you could do it, that's awesome, because I think they are top of mind for the rest of the go-to-market team, and they can see it, they can feel it, right? For me, the biggest takeaway I would say for the audience is that sales, marketing, and product alignment on developing these. Like, there has to be that strong handshake that needs to happen up front. And also talking about what does it mean for a product manager? What does it mean for a rep? What does it mean for a campaign manager? And how will they leverage this information, right? If you don't do it, then they are all very theoretical. So having that alignment at the top and making sure that they understand how they will use it, I think it's extremely important. So that would be my biggest takeaway.
I agree with what both of you said, and I guess we have no offices. It doesn't really help much, except for our Israeli development office, which wouldn't really make sense for that. But I guess for me, it's remember there are multiple personas even as part of development. People think, oh, developers, they're all the same. No, there's enterprise architects. There's the people who want the transformation lead. There's mainframe developers that are very different than sort of your digital developers. And then there's the designers that and business side people, business analysts. Those are all different ones. Now we can keep it simple for each one. We sort of came up with sort of the love language for what they care about. Some of them care about simplifying certain things and bringing in new technology. Some of them care more about usability of the product. And some of them care more about the financial, how it's going to change them financially versus others. So if you can simplify it down to a few words for each one of the different personas that you need, but understand that it's a complex set of, even if we say developer, that doesn't mean anything by itself. You have to pick the paradigms inside of that to make it work.
But thank you guys for participating and for dropping some really awesome knowledge on this audience. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you.
Thanks for having us, Sam.
Good to meet
Thanks,
you all as well.
guys.
Yep. Bye.
Great. Bye.
Thanks.